Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. Julian Cross's calloused hands gripped the wooden hammer as he drove another nail into the support beam. The rhythmic sound of construction filled the remote mountain clearing where his cabin stood. At 38, his muscular frame bore testament to years of physical labor, both in his craft and his humanitarian work. "You're wasting your talents up here." Elena's voice cut through the percussion of his work. She leaned against the cabin's entrance, her designer clothes a stark contrast to the rustic setting. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped impatiently against her phone screen. Julian continued his work without looking up. "This cabin is our future, Elena. Something real, something we built." "Built?" she scoffed, her heel grinding against the fresh timber. "You mean something you built while I watched my youth slip away in this backwater town?" The hammer paused mid-swing. Julian set it down deliberately, turning to face his wife. Her beauty was undeniable. Honey blonde hair, green eyes that could charm anyone, and lips that always seemed poised to deliver another cutting remark. He remembered how those lips had once curved into genuine smiles when they first met, before her hunger for more had consumed her. "Nobody's keeping you here," he said, his voice steady despite the weight behind his words. Elena's laugh held no warmth. "Oh, don't tempt me, darling. We both know you'd be lost without me." The conversation died as Julian resumed his work, each blow of the hammer carrying more force than necessary. Elena disappeared inside, leaving behind a lingering scent of her expensive perfume, a gift she had bought herself with his credit card. Later that evening, in the bedroom of their main house in town, Elena watched Julian pack for his upcoming volunteer mission. His movements irritated her. 3 months in some godforsaken village, she muttered while scrolling through her phone. "What about my needs, Julian?" He zipped up his duffel bag before responding. "The school needs to be built before the rainy season. Those children deserve an education. And I deserve a husband who thinks about more than hammering nails and playing savior to the world." Elena retorted, standing and crossing the room to press herself against his chest, a move that had always worked before. "Stay. I'll make it worth your while." Julian gently but firmly stepped back. "My flight leaves at 6. He shouldered his bag and headed for the door, pausing briefly. "Try not to max out all the credit cards while I'm gone." Elena's face contorted with fury. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Mr. Perfect with his perfect morals and his perfect cabin. You make me sick. Good night, Elena." The door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow hurt more than if he had slammed it. Alone in the room, Elena's phone buzzed with a message. A smile spread across her face as she read it. "Miss you already, beautiful. Can't wait to show you what real excitement feels like." She typed back quickly. "Soon, very soon." In the guest room, Julian lay awake, his mind racing despite his outward calm. Elena's behavior had grown more erratic, more desperate. He had noticed the late-night texts, the unexplained expenses, the lingering scent of unfamiliar cologne. Yet he remained silent, gathering information, watching. Julian Cross was not a man who acted on impulse or emotion. When he struck, it would be decisive. The next morning, before dawn, Julian drove to his cabin. He needed to secure certain items before his departure. In a hidden compartment in the bedroom wall, a feature Elena knew nothing about, he stored a USB drive containing financial records, photographs, and documents. Evidence he had been collecting for months. As he worked, his phone rang. The number belonged to Adrian, his old friend from college who now worked in cybersecurity. "It's happening," Adrian said without preamble. "Your wife's lover. He's been making moves. Big ones." Julian's grip tightened on the phone. "Tell me." "Victor Crane, a professional con artist with a gambling problem. He's been working Elena for months. But that's not the worst part." Adrian paused. "He's been asking about the cabin's value. Word is he's got some heavy debts coming due. Let me guess. About the same amount as what the cabin's worth." "Bingo. Want me to dig deeper?" Julian glanced at the USB drive in his hand. No, keep monitoring them. I'll handle the rest. After hanging up, Julian accessed the hidden safe behind a loose stone in the fireplace. Inside lay more evidence: bank statements showing Elena's suspicious transfers, photos of her with Victor, records of his criminal history that had taken months to compile. He added the USB drive to the collection. "Your move, Elena," he muttered, securing the safe. The flight to the remote village was long, giving Julian time to plan. He had known about Elena's infidelity for months, and had watched her fall into Victor's web with calculated patience. Some might have confronted her immediately, fought to save their marriage, but Julian understood that sometimes you had to let the trap spring before you could catch your prey. His phone buzzed as he landed. A text from Adrian. "They're moving faster than we thought. Elena's been to 3 banks today." Julian deleted the message. Everything was proceeding exactly as he had anticipated. Elena and Victor would act soon, thinking they had him cornered. They had no idea they were playing directly into his hands. In the village, Julian threw himself into the school construction project. His strength and skill earned the respect of the local workers, while his quiet intensity kept them at a comfortable distance. He worked harder than anyone, pushing through the heat and exhaustion, letting the physical labor clear his mind for what was to come. 2 weeks into the project, his phone rang. Elena's number flashed on the screen. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice betraying nothing of what he knew. "I've sold the cabin," Elena announced, her voice dripping with malicious glee. "Victor needed the money, and well, you weren't using it anyway." Julian's response was measured and calm. "Hope it works out." There was a pause. He could hear her confusion at his lack of reaction. "That's it? No begging? No threats? Would it change anything?" "You're pathetic," she spat. "All these years, I've been suffocating in your self-righteous world. Victor sees my worth. He knows how to treat a woman. Goodbye, Elena." He ended the call and turned back to his work, ignoring the concerned looks from his fellow volunteers. Inside, a storm was brewing, but it wasn't the blind rage Elena had hoped to provoke. It was something colder, more calculated. The cabin had been more than just a building. It had been his snare, and Elena and Victor had just walked right into it. That night, Julian sat in his sparse room, his laptop open to his email. Adrian had sent him surveillance photos of Elena and Victor celebrating their victory at an expensive restaurant. In one image, Victor was kissing Elena's neck while she laughed, her wedding ring clearly visible. Julian opened another email containing detailed records of Victor's gambling debts, his connections to local loan sharks, and the fraudulent accounts he had set up in Elena's name without her knowledge. Each piece of evidence had been carefully collected and verified, building an ironclad case that would destroy them both when the time was right. He began composing a new email to his lawyer, setting the next phase of his plan in motion. Elena thought she had won, thought she had broken him. She would learn, as others had before her, that betraying Julian Cross was a deadly mistake. The next few weeks passed in a blur of construction work and careful planning. Julian maintained his routine, giving no indication that anything was amiss. His calls with Elena became less frequent, each conversation shorter than the last. She interpreted his brevity as defeat, never suspecting that every call was being recorded, every admission of her betrayal documented. Adrian kept him updated on Elena and Victor's activities. They had moved into their house now, throwing lavish parties with Julian's money, celebrating their supposed victory. Victor had even started wearing Julian's custom-made shirts, sleeping in his bed, and drinking from his collection of aged whiskey. "They're getting sloppy," Adrian reported. "Victor's been bragging about how he played you. Some of his old victims have started coming forward, willing to testify." Julian absorbed the information silently. Each detail, each act of disrespect, was another link in the chain he was forging. When it finally wrapped around their necks, they would understand the true meaning of revenge. The school project neared completion as Julian's plans crystallized. He had always been good with his hands, skilled at building things. Now he would use those same skills to dismantle two lives, piece by piece, until nothing remained but ruins. "You're different from the others," one of the local elders told him one evening. "There is a darkness in you, hidden behind those quiet eyes." Julian merely nodded. The old man wasn't wrong. The darkness had always been there, carefully controlled and waiting for moments like this. Alina had awakened it, and soon she would wish she hadn't. On the final day of the project, as Julian watched the children enter their new school for the first time, his phone buzzed with a message from his lawyer. Everything was in place. The evidence had been verified, the paperwork filed. The trap was set. He booked his return flight that evening. It was time to go home and show Alina and Victor exactly what kind of man they had crossed. They thought they knew him, the quiet craftsman, the dedicated volunteer, the forgiving husband. They were about to meet the real Julian Cross, and their world would never be the same. Julian's return to town carried none of the fanfare Alina might have expected. No dramatic confrontations, no public scenes. He simply appeared one morning, renting a modest apartment on the outskirts of town. His presence was a quiet reminder of unfinished business. The sight of their house, once his home, now transformed by Alina's gaudy tastes, made his jaw tighten. Gone were the handcrafted furniture pieces he had built, replaced by modern monstrosities of chrome and glass. Through the windows, he could see Victor lounging in his favorite chair, feet propped up on an antique coffee table that had belonged to Julian's father. Enjoying the view, Victor's voice carried across the lawn. He stood in the doorway, wearing one of Julian's custom-made shirts and holding a glass of expensive bourbon. "Alina's not here, if you're wondering. Shopping trip. Your credit cards are getting quite a workout." Julian turned slowly, meeting Victor's smug gaze. "Nice shirt." "Oh, this old thing." Victor plucked at the fabric, a smirk playing on his lips. "Alina says I wear it better than you ever did." "She might be right," Julian replied in a neutral tone, giving nothing away. "It suits a man of your particular talents," Victor continued, though something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps the first seeds of fear. He quickly covered it with a laugh. "You know, I expected more of a fight from you. The way Alina described you, I thought you'd be different. Sorry to disappoint." Julian started to walk away, then paused. "By the way, how's the gambling going? Still owing money to the Ravenwood family?" The bourbon glass slipped from Victor's fingers, shattering on the porch. Julian continued walking, allowing himself a small smile at the sound of Victor's frustrated curses behind him. In his apartment, Julian powered up his laptop and connected to the surveillance system Adrian had installed throughout the house. The cameras captured Alina's return from her shopping spree, arms laden with bags bearing designer labels. "You won't believe who I saw today," she announced as she dropped her purchases on the couch. "Your husband's back in town." Victor paced the living room, still agitated from his earlier encounter. "I know. He was here. What did he say? What did he do?" "Nothing. He just stood there, calm as you please. Then he mentioned the Ravenwoods." Alina's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. "How does he know about them?" "I don't know," Victor snapped. "He shouldn't know anything about my business dealings." "Your business dealings?" Alina laughed hysterically. "Is that what we're calling your gambling debts now?" Julian watched their argument escalate, noting how quickly their united front crumbled under pressure. He opened his email and sent a pre-prepared message to Adrian. Phase 2 could begin. The next day, Julian visited his old friend at his cybersecurity firm. Adrian's office was a maze of monitors and hard drives, each screen displaying different aspects of Alina and Victor's lives. "They've been busy," Adrian said, pulling up financial records. "Victor's opened 3 new accounts in Alina's name. She has no idea she's being set up to take the fall when his schemes collapse." Julian studied the documents, then sent copies to the usual address. "And the other matter?" Adrian grinned. "The evidence from the cabin's hidden safe, already duplicated and secured." They'll never find the originals, even if they tear the place apart. Good, Julian said. As he stood to leave, Adrian stopped him. There's more. Elena's been asking around about divorce lawyers. She's planning to clean you out completely. Let her try, Julian replied. The next few weeks established a routine. Julian worked construction jobs, building his reputation as the defeated husband while gathering more evidence against the lovers. He watched through the surveillance system as their relationship began to show cracks. Elena's attempts to contact him grew more frequent, a mixture of guilt and justification in her messages. He saved each one, adding them to his growing collection of evidence. One evening, Elena appeared at his apartment, her makeup perfectly applied despite the late hour. "We need to talk, Julian," she said. He let her in, noting how she flinched at the sparse furnishings. "Nice place," she lied. "Very. Bachelor." "What do you want, Elena?" he asked. She perched on the edge of his single chair, crossing her legs in a practiced motion. "I've been thinking about us, about everything that's happened." "Have you?" Julian replied coolly. "Don't be like that." Elena leaned forward, using the move that had captured his attention years ago. "We could work this out. I made a mistake with Victor. He's not who I thought he was." Julian watched her performance with detached interest. "And who did you think he was?" "I don't know anymore." She stood, moving closer. "But I know who you are. Strong, dependable, forgiving." Her voice trailed off into a whisper, but something in his tone made her step back. "Is that what you think I am, Julian?" she asked hesitantly. He moved then, closing the distance between them with predatory grace. "You sold my cabin, Elena. You moved your lover into my house. You spent my money and wore my ring while you shared his bed." Each statement drove her back another step, until she hit the wall. "And now you think I'll forgive you?" "You're scaring me," she whispered. "Good." He stepped back, his face once again an expressionless mask. "Go home, Elena. Go back to Victor. You deserve each other." She fled, leaving behind the scent of fear and expensive perfume. Julian waited until her car started before making a call. "It's time," he told Adrian. "Start the transfers." The next morning, Victor discovered his accounts had been frozen. His creditors, mysteriously informed of his whereabouts, began calling. Elena found her credit cards declined and her secret accounts emptied. Julian watched through the surveillance system as their comfortable world began to crumble. They fought, accusations flying, each blaming the other for their misfortunes, neither suspecting that their real enemy was just getting started. He had given them rope, and now he would watch them hang themselves. Julian moved through his former home like a ghost that night. His footsteps were silent on the imported tiles Elena had installed. The security system, which he himself had installed, lay dormant, its codes unchanged despite his departure. An amateur mistake. In the master bedroom, Elena's jewelry box sat on the vanity, a gaudy testament to her materialistic nature. Julian selected pieces. The diamond necklace he had given her on their 5th anniversary, the sapphire earrings from their last Christmas together, and several expensive items Victor had bought her with stolen money. The safe in Victor's office yielded more treasures. Documents detailing his fraudulent schemes, a burner phone containing messages to his criminal contacts, and a thick envelope of cash, marked with the Ravenwood family's distinctive rubber band. Before leaving, Julian placed a handwritten note on Elena's pillow. "You took what was mine. Now I take what's yours." The next morning, Elena's scream echoed through the house. Victor rushed in, his face flushing with anger as he read the note. "It has to be him," Elena paced frantically. "The jewelry, your documents." "He took everything." Victor grabbed her arm roughly. "What documents? What exactly did he take from my office?" "I don't know." "You never tell me anything about your business," she cried, wrenching free and rubbing her arm. "This is your fault. You pushed too far with the cabin sale." "Not my fault." Victor laughed bitterly. You begged me to help you escape your boring life. You promised that your husband would never fight back. Their argument was interrupted by a phone call. One of Victor's business partners had received an anonymous email containing proof of their illegal dealings. The partner was cutting ties immediately. "Fix this," the man growled before hanging up, "or the Ravenwoods will hear about everything." Victor hurled his phone against the wall. "That fool's smarter than you said. He's been planning this. What are you going to do?" Elena asked, fear creeping into her voice. "We need money," Victor replied, his eyes gleaming dangerously. "Your husband's vintage car collection. How much is it worth?" Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "You can't. Those cars meant everything to him. He meant everything to you once, didn't he?" Victor sneered. "Make the calls. Get the papers ready for sale." Later that day, Elena sat in her luxury SUV outside Julian's apartment. She watched him return from work, his clothes dusty from construction, his movements betraying no sign of the cunning opponent he'd become. She jumped when he suddenly appeared at her window. "Taking up stalking, Elena. The cars. Victor wants to sell your cars." Julian's face remained impassive. "They're in your name now. Remember the papers you had me sign while I was boring you?" "Please," she whispered. "Don't let him do this. Like you didn't let him sell my cabin." He stepped back from the car. "Actions have consequences, Elena. It's time you learned that." Tears streaked her designer makeup. "What happened to you? You were never this cruel. I was always this person. You just never bothered to look past the surface." He turned away. "Sell the cars, Elena. Add them to the list of things you'll regret." That night, Julian sat in his apartment reviewing footage from the hidden cameras. Elena and Victor's relationship was fracturing under the pressure. "Good," he murmured. "Broken people make mistakes, and I will be there to capitalize on each one." His phone buzzed with a message from Adrian. "Local newspaper got the evidence. Story runs tomorrow. Want me to send you a preview?" Julian replied affirmatively, and soon his screen filled with tomorrow's headline. "Local business figure linked to criminal enterprise." The article detailed some of Victor's smaller schemes, carefully selected to rattle him without revealing their full hand. Another message from Adrian followed. "Elena's been Googling criminal defense lawyers. She's starting to realize how deep she's in." Perfect, Julian thought. The fear was taking root, just as he planned. Soon, very soon, he would reveal his masterstroke. The truth about the cabin and what lay hidden within its walls. Julian poured himself a drink and raised it in a mock toast to the surveillance feed, showing Elena crying in their former bedroom, while Victor raged on the phone with his creditors. The first strike had landed. The war had begun, and Julian Cross never lost a war. Elena's hands trembled as she gripped her phone, reading Julian's text message for the 20th time. The cabin, rigged with explosives. The words bored into her mind, each syllable a hammer blow against her composure. "Victor," she whispered. She burst into his home office, interrupting a heated phone call. "We need to talk. Now." Victor waved her away, continuing his conversation. "Listen. I can get you the money by Friday. Just give me." The other party hung up, leaving Victor cursing at dead air. "The cabin," Elena blurted out. "Julian says it's rigged with explosives." Victor laughed, but the sound held no humor. "And you believe him? Your boring, predictable husband suddenly turned into a demolition expert. You don't know him like I do." Elena paced the room, her designer heels clicking against the tiles. "He's different now. Colder, more dangerous. He's playing mind games." "Amateur," Victor snapped. "And you're falling for them like a novice." Elena's phone buzzed. Another message from Julian. "Tick-tock." She showed it to Victor, whose face darkened. "That scoundrel thinks he can threaten us. I'll show him who he's dealing with." Before he could continue, his laptop chimed with an incoming email. His face drained of color as he read it. "What?" Elena moved behind him, reading over his shoulder. The screen displayed his account balances, all zeros. "Impossible," he muttered, typing frantically. The accounts were secure. Nobody could breach them. Another email arrived, from Adrian, detailing, "Your husband's friend has gotten into our accounts." Victor slammed the laptop shut. "Your husband's friend? He's gotten into our accounts." Elena's voice rose. "What do you mean, our accounts?" Victor avoided her gaze. "I may have opened some accounts in your name. For business purposes." "You what?" Elena grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. "What kind of business?" "The kind that pays for your shopping sprees," he snarled, jerking away. "Or did you think designer bags grew on trees?" A notification pinged on Elena's phone. A news alert. Her stomach dropped as she read the headline. "Local developer linked to money laundering scheme." The article named several of Victor's associates who had been arrested in a recent sweep. "Your friends are falling like dominoes," she whispered. Victor's phone rang. The Ravenwood family's enforcer. He answered with shaking hands, listening as the man detailed exactly what would happen if Victor didn't repay his debts immediately. "I need air," Elena announced, heading for the door. Victor caught her arm roughly. "Where do you think you're going?" "Let go of me." She wrenched free. "This is your mess. You fix it, our mess." He corrected, his grip tightening. "Don't forget who sold the cabin, who signed the papers. Your fingerprints are all over this, sweetheart." The slap that followed echoed through the room. Elena stared at her hand in shock, then at Victor's reddening cheek. His eyes turned murderous. "You shouldn't have done that." The backhand caught her across the face, sending her stumbling against the desk. Pain bloomed across her cheek as tears sprang to her eyes. "I own you," Victor growled, "both legally and otherwise. So sit down, shut up, and let me think." Elena touched her throbbing face, reality crashing down around her. This man, this monster, was the one she had betrayed Julian for, a thought that made her stomach turn. She fled the house, ignoring Victor's shouts. Her car responded to muscle memory, carrying her through familiar streets until she found herself outside Julian's apartment building. He opened the door before she could knock. Right on schedule. Elena's eyes widened. "What did you do?" she asked in a trembling voice. "I didn't do anything," Julian replied, gesturing to his laptop where multiple screens displayed Victor's financial transactions. "Your boyfriend did it all himself. I just made sure the right people found out. The police will discover quite an interesting paper trail." Julian's voice remained calm, controlled, leading right to her door. Elena sank onto his sparse couch. "I'll tell them everything, about Victor, the fraud, and the cabin sale." Julian raised an eyebrow. "The documents you forged, the money you helped him launder." "I didn't know," Elena cried. "You knew enough." He cut her off. "You knew what kind of man he was, what he was capable of, and yet you chose him anyway." Elena stood, desperation lending her courage. "Help me, Julian. Please. I'll do anything." "Anything?" he asked, studying her with an unreadable expression. "Even help me destroy him?" "Yes," she whispered, not knowing she was signing both of their death warrants. Julian nodded once. "Then let's begin." Back at the house, Victor was making frantic calls to his remaining allies. Each conversation ended the same way. Doors closing, bridges burning. He slammed the phone down after the fifth rejection. His computer chimed again. Another email, this one containing photos of him meeting with known criminals, exchanging briefcases, making deals in dark corners. The subject line read, "Smile for the camera." Victor's world was crumbling, and he knew exactly who to blame. He pulled up a contact he had hoped never to use, a man who specialized in permanent solutions to temporary problems. "I have a job for you," he said into the phone. "It's about my girlfriend's ex-husband." As night fell, 3 separate plans were set in motion. Elena, trembling in Julian's apartment, agreed to wear a wire. Victor, desperate and cornered, arranged for a hitman. And Julian, watching it all through his surveillance network, prepared to spring his trap. The war had entered its final phase, and only one person knew all the players on the board. The cabin stood silent in the mountain clearing, its windows dark against the afternoon light. Victor killed the engine of his sleek sit-in, checking his phone one last time. The message from the anonymous investor still glowed on the screen. Interested in your proposition? Meet at the cabin. Come alone. He needed this deal. The Ravenwoods were breathing down his neck, his accounts frozen, and Elena had vanished after their fight. This mysterious investor promised enough money to solve all his problems, assuming it wasn't a trap. The cabin door creaked open at his touch. Victor stepped inside, his designer shoes leaving prints in the dust. The place still bore signs of Julian's craftsmanship, hand-carved moldings, custom cabinets, attention to detail that spoke of dedication and patience. "Hello," his voice echoed in the empty space. "You're early," came Julian's calm reply from behind him. Victor spun around, reaching for the gun in his jacket. Julian moved faster, disarming him with a brutal twist that sent Victor to his knees. "Amateur move," Julian said, examining the weapon before tucking it into his own waistband. "Just like selling my cabin. If you're going to kill me, get it over with." Victor tried to sound defiant, but fear crept into his voice. "Kill you?" Julian laughed coldly. "That would be too easy." He tossed a thick folder onto the floor between them. "I'd rather destroy you." Victor's eyes widened as he recognized the contents. Bank statements, photographs, transcripts of conversations he thought were private. "How did you?" he began. "I've been watching you for months," Julian replied, circling him slowly. "Learning your habits, your weaknesses, the way you manipulate women into funding your gambling addiction, the money you launder for the Ravenwoods. You don't know what you're dealing with, Victor. No, you don't know what you're dealing with." Julian's voice turned harsh. "Did Elena ever tell you how I built this cabin? Piece by piece, year after year, the same way I built the case against you." Victor lunged forward, trying to tackle Julian. The fight was brief and brutal. Julian's fist connected with Victor's jaw, sending him sprawling. Before he could recover, Julian's boot pressed against his throat. "The hitman you hired," Julian said coolly, increasing the pressure slightly. "He works for me now." Amazing what people will do when you know their secrets. "Please, Julian," Victor choked out, "I'll leave town. You'll never see me again. Like you left your other victims, the ones whose lives you destroyed," Julian replied. He removed his foot, letting Victor gasp for air. "No, you're going to face what you've done." A noise from the bedroom made Victor turn. Elena stepped out, tears streaming down her face. She held up her phone, still recording. "You recorded me." Victor's face contorted with rage. "You treacherous woman." He launched himself at Elena, but Julian intercepted him. The ensuing fight was savage. Victor fought like a cornered animal, landing several solid hits, but Julian's rage was cold and focused. Each punch, each kick delivered with precision, born of planning and purpose. When it ended, Victor lay unconscious on the cabin floor. Elena huddled in a corner, shaking as she watched Julian zip-tie Victor's hands. "The police are on their way," she whispered. Julian nodded and produced another folder. "Make sure they get these two, your signed confession and details of your involvement in his schemes." "What? I helped you. I wore the wire. You betrayed me." Elena stared at him in horror. "Did you really think helping me trap him would erase that?" Julian cut her off. "Elena, you knew what kind of man he was, what he was capable of, and you chose him anyway." Elena stood, desperation lending her a final plea. "Help me, Julian. Please. I love." He began, then stepped back. "I don't." His voice could have frozen fire. "You made your choice when you sold my home. Now you both pay the price." Police sirens wailed in the distance. Elena looked at the folder, then at Julian. "You planned this from the beginning. The explosive story, letting me think I could earn your forgiveness. I learned from the best. You taught me how to lie convincingly." Julian's smile held no warmth. "Your betrayal taught others what to avoid." The police arrived to find Victor unconscious, Elena in tears, and 2 folders of evidence that would send them both to prison. Julian watched from the trees as they were led away in handcuffs, his face betraying no emotion. The trap had sprung perfectly. But this was just the beginning of their punishment. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations as the judge entered. Julian sat in the back row, watching Elena and Victor in their prison jumpsuits, their former glamour reduced to pallid skin and dark circles under their eyes. The evidence was damning. Financial records, recorded conversations, signed confessions. The prosecutor painted a picture of greed, manipulation, and fraud spanning years. Elena's lawyer attempted to portray her as another victim of Victor's schemes, but the paper trail told a different story. The defendant, Elena Cross, the judge's voice cut through the murmurs, having been found guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and accessory to criminal enterprise, is hereby sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Elena's shoulders shook with silent sobs. She glanced at Julian, but he had already stood and was walking toward the exit. Victor's sentence came next, minus 15 years for his more extensive crimes. He remained stone-faced, but his hands trembled as the bailiff led him away. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for Julian's comment. He pushed past them, ignoring their questions about his feelings toward his ex-wife's sentencing. "Let them speculate," he murmured. "My revenge speaks for itself." At home, he found the first letter from Elena waiting in his mailbox. Her precise handwriting filled 3 pages with apologies, explanations, and pleas for forgiveness. He read it once, then filed it away in a drawer. It would not be the last. The news coverage painted him as the victim who had exposed a criminal enterprise. None of them knew the full extent of his manipulation, how he had orchestrated each step of their downfall. Let them see what they want to see, he thought. His phone rang. Adrian with an update. Victor's former associates are making noise. The Ravenwoods aren't happy about losing their money, man. Let them come, Julian replied. I planned for this too. Threats arrived as expected. First phone calls, then notes left on his door. One morning, he found his car's tires slashed. Amateur intimidation tactics that made him smile. He was in his workshop when they finally made their move. 3 armed men, confident, thinking they were hunting prey instead of walking into another trap. "Mr. Cross," their leader called out, gesturing with his weapon. "The Ravenwoods send their regards." Julian set down his tools carefully. "I've been expecting you." The fight was quick and decisive. Julian had chosen the battleground and rigged it to his advantage. When it was over, 3 broken men lay groaning on the floor, surrounded by the implements of their intended violence. He knelt beside their leader. "Tell your employers that Victor's debts died with his freedom. Push this further, and I'll do to them what I did to him." They left with broken bones and wounded pride. The message delivered. Later that night, alone in his house, Julian reviewed his security footage. Elena's last letter lay unopened on his desk, alongside all her previous attempts at reconciliation, each one filed away like evidence in a case he had already won. His phone shined with a message from the prison administrator. Elena wanted to arrange a visit. He deleted it without responding. Some bridges weren't meant to be rebuilt. The news had moved on to other scandals, other crimes. His name faded from the headlines, which suited him just fine. He had never wanted fame, only justice, or perhaps revenge. The line between the two had blurred long ago. In his garage, the spaces where his vintage cars had stood remained empty. Elena had managed to sell them before her arrest, the money lost to Victor's debts. It didn't matter. They were just things, and things could be replaced. What couldn't be replaced was trust, or loyalty, or the years he had wasted loving a woman who had seen his strength as a resource to be exploited. The cabin's demolition was scheduled for next month. He would not attend. Let it fall. Let the mountains reclaim the land, he thought. He had built it once as a testament to love. Its destruction would serve as a monument to betrayal. Julian poured himself a drink and raised it to the security monitors, showing his empty house. To new beginnings, he murmured. Deep down, however, he knew there would be no new beginnings, only variations on old endings that played out again and again until the pain of betrayal faded into something manageable. He was different now, harder, colder. The man Alina had married would have forgiven her, but that man died the day she sold his sanctuary. This new version of Julian Cross had no room for forgiveness in his heart, only the cold satisfaction of revenge perfectly executed. Prison walls couldn't contain Victor's rage. In his cell at the minimum security facility, he plotted his revenge against the man who had destroyed his life. His contacts on the outside were limited, but he still had one card left to play. I need you to handle something for me, he told his visitor, a burly man adorned with prison gang tattoos, a problem named Julian Cross. The man nodded, sliding a paper across the table. It'll cost you. Money's not an issue. I have accounts even he couldn't find. Victor's eyes gleamed with malice. Meanwhile, Julian sat in his office at the domestic abuse charity he had founded, reviewing security footage from his home surveillance system. Adrian had warned him about unusual activity around his property, men watching, taking photos, studying his routines. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Watch your back, Cross. Julian saved the number, adding it to his growing collection of evidence. Let them come, he thought. He had been preparing for this since the day he sent Victor to prison. The attack came 3 days later. 2 men ambushed him in the parking garage after work. They had weapons, training, and the element of surprise, but they lacked the ruthless determination that had kept Julian alive all these years. The fight was brutal and quick. Julian's fist crushed one attacker's throat, while his boot shattered the other's knee. As they lay groaning on the concrete, he retrieved their phones and found messages that led straight back to Victor. Tell your employer, Julian said coldly as he stood over them, that I just bought myself 10 more years in a maximum security cell. His prediction proved accurate. The failed assassination attempt, combined with the evidence he provided to the authorities, earned Victor a transfer to a supermax facility and an extended sentence. But Julian wasn't finished. He had one more card to play in this game. In the prison visitors' room, a stark, uninviting space, Alina sat across from Victor. Her orange jumpsuit was a stark contrast to the designer clothes she once wore. Her hand instinctively moved to cover her slightly swollen belly. You're showing, Victor noted, his eyes fixing on her midsection. That's not why I'm here, Alina replied, her voice trembling slightly. The DA offered me a deal. They want me to testify against you about everything. The fraud, the money laundering, all of it. Victor's face darkened. You wouldn't dare, would you? Alina leaned forward. You used me, Victor. You set me up to take the fall while you played your games. Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? You came to me, Victor snarled, begged me to save you from your boring life. Remember? And look where that got me. He gestured at his prison uniform. Testify against me, and I'll. His voice rose as he struggled to continue. Alina stood, one hand protecting her stomach. There's nothing left for you to take. In the courthouse gallery, Julian watched Alina's testimony with calculated interest. She spoke for hours, detailing Victor's crimes, his manipulation, the web of lies that had ensnared them both. Her voice broke only once, when she described how she had betrayed her husband by selling his beloved cabin. The testimony sealed Victor's fate. The judge's decision to transfer him to maximum security was immediate and final. As Alina was led away, her eyes met Julian's. He saw the question there, the hope for forgiveness. But he turned and walked out, letting his silence speak for him. Later that night, in his home office, Julian reviewed the day's events. Alina's pregnancy complicated matters, but not insurmountably. He had already begun making arrangements to ensure the child would be placed with a good family. His phone rang. Adrian with an update. Victor's being transferred tomorrow. Want me to make sure he has an uncomfortable journey? No, Julian replied. Let him stew in his new home. Knowing he's powerless is punishment enough. The next morning brought news that Victor had arrived at the Supermax facility. Julian marked the occasion by finalizing the paperwork for his charity's newest initiative, a program to help children affected by domestic violence and betrayal. He would never forgive Elena or Victor, but he could use their destruction to help others rebuild their lives. It was the kind of revenge that would outlast them all. In the nursery ward of the prison hospital, activity buzzed as Elena went into labor. 9 months of carrying Victor's child had taken their toll, leaving her exhausted and alone. Miles away, Julian sat in his office reviewing the adoption papers. The family he had chosen was perfect, successful, stable, with no connection to Elena or Victor's sordid past. The child would have a chance at a normal life. Healthy girl, 7 pounds, Adrian announced, forwarding the hospital report. Julian studied the information dispassionately. Make sure all the paperwork is in order. I want the adoption finalized before Elena has a chance to change her mind. Are you really going through with this? Adrian asked, taking her child. I'm giving that child a chance, something its parents never deserved, Julian replied firmly. The adoption process moved swiftly, greased by his influence and resources. Elena, still recovering in the prison hospital, signed the papers without protest. She knew it was the best option, perhaps her only chance to do something right. As Julian rebuilt his life, he found himself drawn to Natalia Chen, a brilliant principal prosecutor who had worked on Victor's case. You're different from my usual clients, she told him over dinner. Most victims want to forget. You built something meaningful from your pain. Pain is a tool, Julian replied, studying her over his wine glass. Like any tool, its value depends on how you use it. Their relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared understanding. Natalia never asked him to forgive Elena, never suggested he let go of his anger. She recognized the steel in his spine for what it was, not bitterness, but strength. In prison, Elena received updates about her daughter through official channels. The adoptive parents sent photographs, carefully screened by Julian's lawyers. The child was thriving, growing strong in a home untainted by betrayal. One evening, as Julian and Natalia reviewed cases for his charity, she asked the question others had avoided. Do you ever regret not giving Elena a second chance? Second chances are earned, Julian said firmly. She made her choice the day she sold my cabin. Everything after that was consequence, and the child will grow up never knowing how her parents betrayed each other. He closed the file he was reading. That's the greatest gift I could give her. Elena's letters arrived regularly now, each one detailing her progress in prison programs, her hopes for redemption. Julian filed them away unread, adding to the archive of her attempts at reconciliation. Natalia watched him organize the letters one night. You keep them all. Why? Reminders, he explained quietly, of who she was, and who I'll never be again. Their life together took shape around his mission. The charity grew, helping more victims rebuild their lives. Julian's reputation as an advocate for the betrayed attracted attention, funding, and support, yet he never softened, never wavered. The man who had built a cabin with love was gone, replaced by someone harder, more focused. Natalia understood that this was not a flaw but the very foundation upon which he had rebuilt himself. One morning, a letter arrived from Elena, different from the others. Inside was a simple message. Thank you for saving our daughter from becoming like us. Julian added it to his collection without comment. Some debts could never be repaid. Some wounds never healed. He had accepted this truth the day he chose revenge over forgiveness. Years later, the cabin's demolition drew a small crowd, locals who remembered when Julian built it, reporters attracted by the notorious ending of the story, and a few of Elena's former friends, hoping for one last glimpse of the drama that had captivated their town. Julian stood apart from them all, Natalia by his side, as the wrecking crew moved into position. The cabin that had been his dream, and then his weapon, would soon be reduced to memory. "Wait," one of the workers called out. "There's something in the foundation." In a hidden compartment, preserved against time and weather, lay a letter. Julian recognized his father's handwriting immediately. "My son, I watched you build this cabin the way I watched you build your life, with patience, skill, and determination. You faced each challenge as I knew you would, with the strength that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. This cabin is more than wood and nails. It's a testament to the man you've become, the legacy you'll leave. Whatever storms you weather, remember, true strength isn't in never falling, but in how you rise afterward." Dad Julian folded the letter carefully, tucking it into his pocket. The demolition resumed, reducing his father's legacy and his own pain to rubble. Later, in his office at the charity, he finalized plans for the property's future. The mountain site would become a retreat for abuse survivors, a place where others could rebuild their lives as he had rebuilt his. Elena's release date approached, marked on his calendar like any other appointment. Her final letter arrived a week before. "I won't ask for forgiveness. We both know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I understand now. The cabin wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of everything I was too blind to value. You turned our tragedy into something meaningful. That's a kind of revenge I never saw coming." He never replied, but he did attend her release, watching from a distance as she left the prison gates. She looked older, subdued, her designer tastes replaced by simple clothes and quiet dignity. Natalia found him in his office afterward, staring at the cabin's blueprints. "Regrets?" she asked softly. "No," he answered truthfully. "Just memories." At the charity's annual gala, unexpected news arrived. Elena had been spotted in a distant city, Port Aurora, working at a women's shelter, using her experience to help others avoid her mistakes. She never contacted Julian again. Their daughter, now 5, thrived with her adoptive family. Julian maintained distant surveillance, ensuring she remained protected from her biological parents' toxic legacy. Quarterly reports showed a happy, well-adjusted child who would never know the price of betrayal. Victor's death in prison barely made local news, a brief mention of a career criminal who died as he lived, alone and unmourned. Julian marked the occasion by doubling his charity's funding for the year. On the mountain where the cabin once stood, the retreat center rose like a phoenix from the ashes of his past. Each room bore a plaque with his father's words. "True strength isn't in never falling, but in how you rise afterward." The legacy of betrayal had been transformed into a foundation for healing. Julian would never grant forgiveness, only the cold, clear purpose of a man who had learned that some betrayals must never be forgotten. One evening, as Julian reviewed security footage in his empty house, Elena's last letter lay unopened on his desk, a silent archive of all her attempts at reconciliation. His phone buzzed with a message from the prison liaison. Elena wanted to arrange a visit. He deleted it without a second thought. Some bridges, he believed, were never meant to be rebuilt. Later that night, in his office at the Cross Center for Healing, Julian finalized arrangements for the foundation's future. The Highland property would serve as a retreat for survivors, a place to rebuild, much like he had rebuilt himself from the ashes of betrayal. His phone rang. Adrian was on the line with updates. "Victor's old contacts are still trying to stir up trouble. Marcus is monitoring the situation, and our security upgrades are in place." Julian listened calmly. "Let them come. They'll soon learn that my response to betrayal is unyielding." As the months passed, Elena's letters dwindled, each one a reminder of a past she could neither escape nor change. In his private office at the center, Julian reviewed the latest report on Elena's daughter, Emma, now 15. The adoption had been the one mercy he had granted, ensuring that the girl grew up free from her biological parents' toxic legacy. Emma excelled in school, played the violin, and showed a remarkable talent for mathematics. Her adoptive parents, carefully chosen and generously supported through Julian's hidden channels, had given her everything Elena and Victor never could: stability, love, and a future untainted by betrayal. During a board meeting for the foundation, Julian watched his team present reports on new initiatives, programs for children affected by domestic violence, legal aid for survivors, and rehabilitation services for families torn apart by betrayal. His revenge had evolved into something larger than himself, a force for transformation that would outlive its origins. Later, while driving home with Natalia, she broke their comfortable silence. Emma's adoptive parents called. "She's asking questions about her biological family." Julian's tone was measured. "The adoption agreement includes strict guidelines about disclosure. Emma will learn nothing until she turns 21, and even then only if she chooses to." Natalia observed his determination. That's what matters. At home, their modern house bore little resemblance to the mountain cabin that had started everything. No handcrafted furniture, no rustic touches. Julian no longer built things with his hands. His tools now were influence, resources, and an unwavering purpose. One morning brought news from Port Aurora. Elena had been hospitalized, her condition deteriorating rapidly. With her death approaching, she had made one final request: a meeting with Julian. "You don't know me anymore," Natalia reminded him as he considered the request. "No," Julian agreed, "I don't. But I'll go anyway, not out of compassion or closure, but to witness the final chapter of a story I orchestrated." The hospital room was stark and clinical, a fitting setting for their last encounter. Elena barely resembled the beautiful, manipulative woman who had betrayed him. Cancer had hollowed her cheeks and dulled her once bright eyes. Her hand trembled as she reached for a manila envelope on her bedside table. "I won't ask for forgiveness," she whispered, her voice rough. "I just want you to know that I understand now. What I destroyed wasn't just a cabin or a marriage, it was faith itself." Julian said nothing, his face impassive. Elena continued, pushing the envelope toward him. "I never tried to interfere. I only wrote letters for each birthday. They're all here for when Emma is ready, if she ever wants to know." "You've lost the right to make requests," Julian replied coldly, taking the envelope. "Not for Elena's sake, but for Emma's future questions. Your charity." Elena managed a weak smile. "It helps people. That's more than I ever did. Your choice has helped create it." Julian acknowledged her softly. "Your betrayal taught others what to avoid." He left without saying goodbye, the envelope heavy in his hand. Outside, Port Aurora's rain matched his mood. Not sad, not angry, just resolute. Back at the center, life continued its carefully structured pattern. The foundation's work expanded, touching more lives and building new success stories. Natalia's legal team won groundbreaking cases that set precedents to protect future victims of betrayal. Emma's 16th birthday came and went. Photographs showed a bright-eyed teenager with Elena's features, but none of her darkness. Julian filed the photos alongside Elena's birthday letters, a legacy held in trust, waiting for questions that might never come. Adrian, now married with children of his own, maintained his vigilance over their digital empire. His daughter interned at the foundation, learning about the complex web of protection her father had helped build. "Tell her the truth," Julian advised Adrian during one of their security briefings. Some betrayals forged stronger steel. Years had proven him right. His refusal to forgive hadn't frozen him in bitterness. It had fueled an engine of change. The foundation helped people rebuild without demanding that they forget or forgive. It was a philosophy born from his own transformation. Elena died in early spring, a fact noted only briefly in the security logs. Julian added the information to Emma's file, another piece of history for her to someday discover if she wished. The foundation hosted its annual gala the following week. Survivors shared their stories, donors pledged support, and Julian watched from the background as his legacy continued to grow. Natalia found him there, her voice gentle. "You've built something extraordinary." "We all did," Julian corrected. "Every person who chose to rebuild rather than break." The Highland property had changed beyond recognition. The cabin's foundation lay buried beneath the center's main building. Yet Julian kept one relic from those days. His father's letter, its worn paper a reminder of wisdom passed down. "True strength isn't in never falling, but in how you rise afterward," it read. Standing on the center's observation deck, Julian reflected on the decades of transformation. His revenge had been complete, but its aftermath had created something unexpected, a framework for others to rebuild their shattered lives. Emma would turn 21 in a few years, gaining the right to learn her history if she chose. Alina's letters remained in his safe, along with documentation of everything that had happened. The truth would be hers to discover or ignore. Natalia joined him on the deck, their silent understanding a sharp contrast to his tumultuous past with Alina. Together, they watched the sunset over the center's campus, secure in the knowledge that their work would continue, helping others rise from betrayal's ashes. The cabin was gone. Victor was dead. Alina had followed her own path. But Julian Cross's true revenge lived on, not in destruction, but in the strength he helped others find. He had transformed betrayal's poison into purpose, building a legacy that would endure long after the original wound had faded into history. As darkness fell over the Highlands, lights came on across the campus. In counseling sessions throughout the complex, people worked to rebuild their lives, each one adding another layer to the foundation Julian had built from his pain. He hadn't forgiven, and he never would. But he had done something more powerful. He had turned his vengeance into victory, not just for himself, but for anyone strong enough to rise from betrayal's ruins and build again. Some fires don't destroy, they forge. Some betrayals don't break, they build. And some revenge isn't about ending things, it's about creating something unbreakable from the wreckage. That was Julian Cross's ultimate legacy. Not the man who had loved and lost, but the man who had turned loss into an instrument of change. The cabin's revenge had become something greater than vengeance, more lasting than hatred, more powerful than forgiveness. It had become hope.